If you're joining us on live stream, the audio's not broke. My name's Justin, and I'm just pleased to share my great wisdom with you. Even fools are thought wise when they shut up. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent. I've got another proverb for you, not from the Bible, but it could be because it's on a similar vein. Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt. Gets attributed to Abe Lincoln, Mark Twain, a few others, but it's a good proverb to live your life by. I first understood the power of silence when I was 19. I was 19. At 17, passed my driving test, second time, that was traumatic, and bought this gorgeous blue Fiesta. We've got it here. Oh, yes. Mark II, 1 litre. With the sunroof, you know where you twist it as you're driving along and it cranks up. And then if you want to fully open it, you push the clip and lift the entire pane of glass into the car. And then somebody is sitting with a pane of glass on their lap as you're driving along because you've got the sunroof open. It was before they worked out they could slide them in between the ceiling and the roof. So I had this gorgeous blue Fiesta for 2 years. Called it Felix. For 2 years had it, and then my sister was selling her Vauxhall Corsa, which wasn't quite as nice, I've got to be honest, but it was much newer, mechanically much more sound, so it was a financial decision, a shrewd financial decision to sell the Fiesta and invest in the Corsa. We found a local garage that specialised in buying and selling Fiestas, so I rang him up, talked to him about the Fiesta. He said, yeah, I'll give you 800 quid for that. So me and my dad, we toddled along, and he had a look round it. We sat down in the office, and the guy said, yes, so yes, £700 then. What? I didn't quite, this was the first negotiation I'd been in, so I was like, I don't know what you do or what you say. So my dad just leaned forward and went, on the phone you said 800. And then he sat back. And the guy said, well, now I've had a look round it. It's not quite as nice as your son described it. There's a few bits and bobs, a bit of work I need to do, a bit of this, bit of that. So, we'll say 700. At this point, I couldn't get any words out of my mouth, but inside I was racing. I was like, yeah, that's £100. I haven't got a spare £100, and I've already lined up the course. What are we going to do? So I looked at my dad. I was like, Dad, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? Dad just sits there, completely silent. I said, Dad, what are you doing? He's going to stiff us for 100 quid. Quick, say something, negotiate, jump into action. Dad's just there, still as a corpse. And after quite an awkward period, the guy leaned forward and went, well, okay, if it helps out, I'll do you 720. I was like, 720, we're 20 quid up. I was like, but no, we're still £80 down. Like 720, you said on the phone, 800. I'm like, Dad, what are you going to do? Come on, Dad, say something. Come on, negotiate. This is where we have to back and forth. Come on, barter. I don't know what to do. Like 1,000 thoughts going through my head. Dad does not move. Completely silent, completely still. After another long, awkward silence, the man leans forward. He goes, well, son, all right, 750. 750, that's my final offer. And I was like, what do we do now? Because we're in the middle. And that's kind of good etiquette, isn't it? English, if you're going to negotiate, you have to land in the middle. As long as you land in the middle, that's fine. So, Dad, what are you going to do? Come on, Dad, what are we going to say? Come on, you need to do something. What's going to happen, Dad? So eventually the guy leans forward again. He's like, okay, well, 780 then, 780. I'm like, he's on the ropes. Go on, knock the killer blow. We're going to get this. Go on, say something, do something. Dad. And after what felt like an age, the man went, I'll give you the 800 quid then, that's fine. My dad leaned forward and went, thank you very much, that's very, very kind. And that's when I learnt the power of silence. Speech is silver, but silence is golden. Silence is golden. What am I saying? That's our series for this month, where we're thinking about the words that come out of our mouth. And it's not a fun series, actually. The moment we sat down to start look at this as a team, I was like, I hope I'm not preaching on this. Because actually this is really challenging, isn't it? The words that we say. Matthew 12, one of our key scriptures. Matthew 12, 36 to 37. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. On the day of judgment, you will give an account for every careless word you speak. If on that great day you look down the queue and I'm in front of you, go get coffee. Like, go get yourself a coffee, maybe a magazine. Like, you're going to be a while. Because even for kind of a deep introvert who hasn't really got much conversational skills, like, it's very easy for careless words to just pour out of our mouth, isn't it? I mean, if I see some of you ahead of me, it's not coffee I'm getting, it's a 6-week cruise I'm going to get. I mean, some of you just love talking. And all of this stuff just pours out of our mouth without us even needing to think. And yet Jesus says on the day of judgment, you'll give an account for every single one of those words. So what do we do? What's our response? Well, I want to suggest 2 things. Firstly, don't panic. Okay? Because if you believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, and you confess with your mouth, then the blood of Jesus is enough to cleanse you from all unrighteousness, even the ones that roll out of your mouth. I mean, Jesus died for us so that we could be forgiven for the words that come out of our mouth. The grace of God, he covers all sin. We don't need to panic on that day of judgment because he's already taken the punishment for the careless words that we have spoken. And if you're joining us and maybe you wouldn't describe yourself as a follower of Jesus or you're watching online, at the end of the service, you can go to renewalcc.com/nextsteps, put your email address in. We'll send you 5 short videos that explain what it means to be a Christian. And you too could use your mouth to say, Jesus is Lord. I believe it in my heart. And I can approach that day with confidence. But if we've already done that, here's the second response that I think we should have to Jesus' words. Let's just say less. I mean, let's just say less. Try it this week. See what happens to your life, your sense of spirituality, your peace and your joy if you just found as many times as possible to close this. What if we just said less? Proverbs 17:27, a truly wise person uses few words. A person with understanding is even-tempered. See, we think wisdom is displayed when we open this. That's when we think we display our wisdom. Have you ever been in those meetings, or maybe you've done some training at work, or there's lots of people asking questions, and you've not really got a question to ask, but you kind of feel like, I should say something. Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of one of those questions where somebody's kind of asking something or they're saying something. They've got nothing to say, but they feel like because everybody else is saying something, I should say something. So I'll say something and prove that I've actually got nothing to say, but at least I feel like I've contributed. Do you know, that's not wisdom. Wisdom is not knowing when to open your mouth. It's knowing when to close it. A truly wise person uses few words, but it's so easy for us to get caught up into the culture of this world where we need to have our say, where our opinion is important, where it's deeply, deeply devaluing if we're not heard, where we've got to have a comment and an opinion on absolutely everything. Johnny last week told you about the PVC version of the Bible. It was a brilliant joke in the middle of a brilliant message, so I suggest you go back and watch that. But I've got a new version of the Bible to read to you as well. James 1:19-21. Everyone should be slow to listen, quick to speak, and even quicker to speak angrily. After all, if you aren't speaking out loudly and angrily on social media about how terrible other people are, how can you claim to be an ethical human being? Therefore, spend all of your time judging others with your speech and pushing out with anger your opinionated word. This is what justifies you. That's the JT version. But that's the world we live in. Everyone is so quick to speak. Everyone is so quick to speak about others and cast kind of stones at other people and condemn other people and point out how everybody else is useless and rubbish. Just pushing out with anger all of our opinions. And electronic communication and social media has just made this so easy for us. So easy that we can just comment and make criticisms about people who we don't even know where they live. I mean, we don't even know their middle name. We don't even know what's important to them, and yet we feel permission and obliged to make comments about their life, or about what they're saying, or about what they're doing. This has changed the way we communicate. And 5 years ago, I would have said, people say things online that they would never say to people's faces. But I'm not so sure anymore. Because I think this has desensitized us to communication. And because we see it on here, we're starting to think it's okay to do. If it's okay on here, then this is how we can communicate face to face. It's not okay on there. But the issue with technology, as great as it is it interrupts the way God created communication. Communication is an intimate, reciprocal dance. So because you laughed at the Fiesta story, I pushed it a little bit harder. If you hadn't have done, I would have backed that off. Like, as I'm communicating, as I'm speaking to you now, I'm like, okay, who's awake, who's asleep, who's looking bored, who's looking engaged, who's saying amen, who's, checking Facebook. And the feedback that you're giving me, I'm adjusting my communication and what I'm saying and taking it back to you, because that's how communication works. But the thing is, with technology, we've taken what should be an intimate dance and we've made it ping pong. So I'll take this thought and ping it out there. And then I'll take this thought and ping it back. And there's no, as I'm speaking, I can see this is coming across a bit strong, so let me just moderate what I'm saying. Or actually, I can see I'm hitting the mark here, and yes, there's some emotion coming up, but this is positive and healthy for the other person, so I'm going to push in and lean in. I mean, that's what we do when we communicate face to face. But when we communicate electronically, we just pour it all out there. And then the other person gathers it all up and pours it all back. I mean, you just got to love those reply all emails, right? I mean, like if you were all stood around, is that how you would communicate to everybody? But I think the problem is, actually, sometimes yes. Where has gracious speech gone? When even, our world leaders now speak publicly like they speak on Twitter. It's just horrendous. The way we are talking and communicating to each other. Speech is one of the things that defines what it means to be a human. It's one of the things that makes us human. So I know you can teach a gorilla to make 78 signs and call it cute. But until it can invent Cockney rhyming slang, until the gorilla is writing little ditties, roses are red, violets are blue, why do you always smell like... Until the gorilla can craft a sentence that makes another gorilla cry or another gorilla rage, I'm not impressed. Because speech is actually one of the things that defines us as different from the rest of creation. Because we're made in the image of God. And the first revelation of God is that he is and that he speaks. In the beginning God was, and he spoke, let there be, and there was. See, human language, when we speak, it creates things. God's word framed the world. Your words frame your world. Don't believe me? Try speaking negatively for a whole week. See how you're feeling by next Sunday. Try speaking positively and being grateful and speaking out all the things you're grateful for, and see how you're feeling next Sunday. Of course, the issue is our words don't just create our worlds, but they frame other people's worlds. They have power. I mean, language is a gift. It's where we get to reflect the image of God. And yet so often it's where we prove how unlike God we are. As Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. This is what James actually says. James 1:19-21 in the NIV. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen. Man, what if we rushed in to hear what somebody else was saying? So often we rush in to get our opinion and our viewpoint across. James says, what if the rush was to hear what somebody else is saying. Listening to another human is just a great gift. And not trying to think of your reply, not kind of framing how you're going to come back at them and point out where they've got things right, but actually just sitting and saying, with no agenda, let me just hear what you have to say. That's holy. That's sacred space, because God hears our prayers. And so few people are listened to. So few people are listened to. Again, don't believe me, try and experiment this week. Keep this closed and just listen to everyone around you. You'll be amazed at what they tell you. I mean, if you just sit quietly, it doesn't take very long before people start pouring their hearts out. Because most people have so few spaces where somebody will just listen and let them think out loud and let them just talk. What if we were quick to listen? What if we were slow to speak? Proverbs 10:19 says this: too much talk leads to sin. Be sensible and keep your mouth shut. If we were quick to listen, but then slow to speak, maybe we'd be a bit more like Jesus. Maybe our words would have a little bit more power. We're so used to trying to justify ourselves with words, and actually it's an abundance of words that leads us into sin. He then goes on to say, slow to become angry. Because that anger of humans does not produce the righteousness that God is looking for. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because speaking out, speaking angrily, speaking forcefully can sometimes feel really, really good. It feels like righteousness. Because we're pointing out somebody else's sin. We're pointing out where somebody else is getting it wrong. We're pointing out how terrible somebody else is. And so we're venting out our anger, and it feels good. But actually God says that it feels like righteousness, but that's not the kind of righteousness I'm looking for. Venting out angrily feels good in the moment. Long term does nothing to help you deal with your anger. It might release a pressure for a moment, but you are sowing the seeds for the next outburst right there and then. Here's what Psalm 4:4 says: be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Suppressing your anger doesn't work. Suppressing your venting outpourings does. Take your anger to God. Process it with him. Be silent. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Maybe if we're struggling with anger, rather than going after the anger, we need to go after the mouth and just silence it a little bit. Like Johnny said last week, so often we're just throwing oxygen into the fire, when if we kept silent, we'd starve it and it would die down. I'm not saying we shouldn't speak. What I'm saying is we're called to give a reason for the hope within us, not an opinion on somebody else. And whilst we're giving opinions, I'm not convinced we can give reasons. Maybe we just need to say less. Two key moments from the life of Jesus where Jesus says a lot less than you and I would. John 8. 2-11, at dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him. And he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, Those who heard began to go away one at a time, the old ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." So the religious elite catch a woman in adultery and they drag her, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure that's a two-player game. But they drag the woman and they bring her not to Jesus but to the group. Trial and judgment and shame by public forum is not new. It's just with our social media, we've got a lot more proficient at it. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because they don't bring her to Jesus, they bring her to the group and then ask Jesus to wade in. Listen, if it's got 100 comments, it don't need yours. If it's already got 100 comments, don't make it 101. Be that online or on the ground. They don't come to Jesus going, "Jesus, we don't quite know what to do here. What should we do? We really want to know what you think." They bring her to the group and they are shaming her publicly and then asking Jesus to wade in. Now, Jesus does have an opinion on her sin, by the way, but he refuses to share it with the group. And maybe as Christians, if the group are speaking, we should be silent. And Jesus just bends down and starts doodling in the sand. Now, different commentators will give you lots of interesting things as to what he's doing and why he's doing that. For me, in the context of what we're looking at today, the interesting thing is that Jesus deliberately ignores them. He deliberately refuses to speak. And this is an angry mob. So they're getting worked up to stone her. So this is not, well, let's have a philosophical debate. Okay, this thing is rolling now. And they have literally dragged her from a bedroom. They have brought her publicly. They are ready to stone her. They are condemning her and shouting at her angrily. And they're like, "Jesus, do you want to wade in?" And his silence is deafening. It says they keep on questioning him. You see, we do need to speak up. But in order to speak up, we need to know when to shut up. Because if Jesus had brought his words at the beginning, it would have been lost in the mob. But when the mob are raging, Jesus is silent. I wish the church were too. I wish we were silent when the world was raging. It's going, I refuse to get involved in mudslinging. I refuse to get involved in tearing somebody down. I refuse to get involved in angry communication. Let me just doodle over here. And when you are ready. And then Jesus stands up and says, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." See, when James in our passage says, "Get rid of all moral filth," he's not talking about everybody else. He's not saying go around and find it in the community. He's saying find it in your own heart. Don't be quick to talk about others' moral filth. Deal with your own. And then one by one, the crowd disappear. And Jesus' silence builds him a platform to speak. And then he speaks to the woman with dignity. He validates the image of God in her. Has no one condemned you? Then neither do I. And then, after he has stood before the angry mob and her, after he has remained silent while everybody else is pushing and pressing him to join in, after he has turned their accusations back towards them as they've gone away, then and only then he gets to say, "Listen, you need to leave your life of sin." Church, if we want to speak up, first we need to shut up. And let our silence be the first thing that is heard. And then people will be ready to hear what we have to say. But people won't hear the reasons for the hope if they're drowning in condemnation because we've spouted our opinions. Second incident in Jesus' life. You find it Matthew 26, 27 or Mark 15 and 16. Jesus is dragged. He's arrested and he's dragged before the high priest. And everyone is throwing accusations at him. And like a lamb to the slaughter, he remains silent. After that, they drag him to Pilate. And Pilate actually says to him, like, "Can you not hear everything that is being thrown at you?" And Jesus remains silent. He really only speaks wants. When the high priest says, I adjure you, I command you, I make an oath over you, are you the Son of God? And he says, well, you've said I am. But I tell you from now on, you'll see the Son of Man seated on the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of glory. You see, Jesus is being asked to justify himself, to defend himself, to respond to the accusations about himself, and he remains silent. He refuses to self-justify so he can justify you and me. And sometimes we talk so much because we're trying to justify ourselves. Whether we're trying to convince ourselves, maybe we're trying to convince other people. But while we're trying to talk ourselves up, while we're trying to self-justify, while we're trying to prove ourselves right, we miss the opportunity to reveal God. And Jesus holds his silence under the most unbelievable outpouring of anger and words and accusation that flies at him. And he holds his silence until he gets a moment to reveal who God is. Church, we have so much to say. Man, we have got a message that the world needs to hear. But the issue is we can't bring it when we're trying to justify ourselves, when we're pointing the finger at everybody else and condemning everybody else, when we're speaking angrily, when we're speaking carelessly. Our message will not be heard. But if we learn to say less, if we're quick to listen, if we're slow to speak, if we don't let other people's communication provoke anger in us and we learn to hold ourselves, then the moment will come when our silence builds us a platform and we get to say a few quiet, gentle words that will speak louder than all the rage of hell. You know, I struggle with my mouth like everybody else, particularly when I'm doing DIY or driving. But in one of the offices I worked in once, after a new colleague had joined us, 6 weeks in, she said to me, "You don't swear. I've never heard you swear." And I wasn't being smart, I wasn't being clever, I didn't really think about it, the words just came out of my mouth. And I just said, I've got better things to do with my mouth. I wonder if that would be a good filter for us this week. Every time we go to speak, is there something better I could do with my mouth than what I'm about to do? Because if there is, let's say less. And let's do that. We need to say a whole lot, church. But first, we need to learn to say a whole lot less.